Hi everyone, I'll just give it a minute or two just to let everyone trickle in and then we'll get started with today's webinar. Lovely, so we've still got a few people filtering through, but we will kick off because we've got a lot of good content to get through today. So welcome everyone. So today's webinar we'll be looking at women's mental health in the workplace. And today's session will be hosted by Purple's Head of Business Partnerships, Charlene Overend. And then we're also joined by Emily Gray from Mid and North Essex Mind. And then we'll hear from Laura May about her lived experiences with mental health in the workplace. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. The session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Purple365 portal after the webinar, along with the shorter bite-sized version as well. Captions are enabled, so if you need these, just turn them on in your tab on Zoom. And if you have any questions for either Emily or Laura as we go through the session, you can pop these in either the Q&A or the chat box, and we'll try and leave a bit of time at the end to go through all of these. So I'll now hand over to you, Charlene.
Thanks, Lauren. So welcome everybody. Before we get started with today's session and I introduce the lovely Emily, I would like to just set the scene for the session. So obviously most of you hopefully would know that this is National Inclusion Week and it's about inclusion in the workplace. And next month we have World Mental Health Day, which is on the 10th of October. So we felt that it was really important really to focus in on mental health as a topic, and particularly in women's mental health in the workplace. We did earlier in the year focus in and spotlight on men's mental health. So if you do want to access those resources, the live recording and the supporting learning resources, you can also access those in the Purple365 portal. So men's and women's mental health, so men, affect each other in similar rates. There is, however, specific challenges around mental health in the workplace that women experience. And some of these are tied to gender roles and stereotypes, and some of these are intersectional in nature. But women are prone to certain diagnoses and are twice as likely as men to experience depression and generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD. Pay inequity and caregiving responsibilities are among the contributing factors and risk factors that are common around mental health conditions. Infertility, menopause, and postpartum depression can also affect women's mental health. Women face these issues, obviously, throughout their working lives, and whilst also juggling family life and also juggling work and part-time work. And so therefore, it's really, really essential for effective support to be put into place in the workplace. So with this in mind, I think this is now the perfect opportunity to hand you over to Emily, who will talk you through and take you through some really valuable training on this topic. Over to you, Emily.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. So as you know, my name is Emily, and I work for Mid and North Essex Mind. I'm a mental health trainer, and also we deliver suicide awareness sessions, and just really creating that awareness around mental health. I personally am super passionate about mental health and well-being. My career background is very people-centric, shall we say, so it's something that I'm really, really passionate about, and super grateful for the opportunity to join you all today as well here, so that we can look in a little bit more detail around women's mental health and what we can do to support women and ourselves within the workplace. So first of all, next slide please, Lauren. I want to ask a question and open it up to you guys really. Just take a few moments, just think about some of the things that you currently do to look after your mental health and your overall well-being. And if you're happy to sort of share, please pop in the chat box. I think it'd be really good just to get an idea of what we're all doing at the moment, but also an opportunity to perhaps take some inspiration from what other people are doing. I don't know if I can see the chat box, can I, Lauren? So I don't know if you can let me know as they start coming in. some of the things that I kind of do, I'm actually a keen runner. So to help me decompress, I do love going for a run, but I completely get that's not everybody's idea of fun. But there's a whole host of different things. So yeah, we've got kickboxing. Yeah, love that. I love body combat. Reserve some time to reflect. That's so important. That space, and reading and gardening. Yeah, being out in nature, using our creative skills as well. What else have we got? Oh, Pilates. Yeah, love Pilates. Good for the body and the mind. And walking the dog. So much said for pet therapy. So yeah, we've got some really good comments there coming in. Colouring, lots of creation, writing everything down as well. Yeah, that's sort of getting it out of our head. Physical activity, sense like perfume. I like that. Yeah, like using your senses there. Retail therapy, brilliant. Keep them coming. And yeah, please, everyone sort of have a look through, read through them, and see what you can take from there. Because there's some good ideas there that I might also take some inspiration from. Next slide, please, Lauren. So first of all, let's have a look at mental health in general, as we all have it, regardless of our gender, and it does have a huge financial and human cost, as we can see here. So shockingly, 1 in 6 people across the UK do experience symptoms of poor mental health in any given week. You may have heard the 1 in 4 number, and that is very much that's based on in any given year. We've got to bear in mind with statistics as well, these aren't always going to be entirely accurate. We've got to remember there's a lot of people that won't necessarily disclose that they're actually going through stress or they're in a mental health crisis. Mental ill health costs UK businesses 42 to 45 billion annually, so it has a huge financial impact. And surprisingly, it's actually presenteeism that is 4 times more costly than that of actual absence. So that's people coming into work when they're not fit and able, not being as productive, potentially making mistakes and so on. There are over 1.5 million people in work in the UK that actually have a diagnosed long-term mental health condition. And not everybody is going to necessarily open up and disclose that they're actually living with a mental health condition. 300,000 people with a long-term mental health condition do lose their job every year. And there's a whole host of factors really that come into that. And it's very much around that support potentially that's being offered in the workplace, people actually being able to talk about it. Might just leave and it's not actually obvious that it was for that reason. And mental health actually accounts for 44% of all instances of poor health at work. So it's just as important, we can see here, as our physical health. Next slide, please, Lauren. So the Health and Safety Executive have identified 6 key causes of stress at work. And the first one is really not being able to cope with the demands of the job. So that extra pressure and the demands are potentially unrealistic, and being unable to control the way we actually do our work. It's really important with anything in life, but especially at work, that we do feel that we're in control, and that helps us perform better. And not getting enough information or support as well in order to be able to actually carry out our role successfully, which can ultimately lead to that feeling that we're not delivering and we're not good enough. And then relationships, having trouble with relationships at work. Potentially there's bullying and discrimination, unfortunately, that can still take place in work environments and can sometimes go quite under the radar. And also our role, we can start a new position or be in a position, and as the company evolves and grows and changes, like we all do, because that is life, we all grow and evolve, our role can too. And if there's extra parts of that role that perhaps haven't been communicated to, we don't really know, we haven't got that clarity that that's actually forming part of our role, that again can cause extra stress and change. Companies are always evolving, growing, needing to move with the market, and with that doesn't always come that clear communication of what is going on, and it can really lead to that feeling of uncertainty and unsettlement, and not really knowing what might be happening at work, and you start going into overdrive with your thought process. Next slide, please, Lauren. So Mind conducts an annual survey across varying sizes of organisation, and produce a workplace wellbeing index every year. it's a really good benchmark to be able to use for best practice and policies, really identify what are companies doing well and areas that they can improve in as well. So the links should come up on this slide, but feel free to, yeah, there they are. So these should all be distributed. So it's definitely worth your organisation potentially having a look at this. But motivation, just having that motivation to do your job. We can all feel pressure at work, but ultimately if we enjoy our job, we like what we're doing, then we're going to do it well. And feel well within ourselves, more importantly. And having a manageable workload. If your workload's unmanageable, you will find yourself in stress and you will find yourself in burnout, obviously having a significant impact on mental health and overall well-being. Good relationships, it's really imperative, you know, that those conversations can happen so that, you know, your line managers and your team know how best to support you if you are experiencing mental health or struggling with your well-being. And having that time just to take notice as well. We're all very, very busy. We were discussing this actually prior to coming on here, rushing from one meeting to the next meeting. Our task lists are always forever ending, forever evolving. You know, we're always thinking about the next thing and work, outside of work as well. So it's really about having that time to actually be present within the surroundings, and your physical environment as well at work is so important. And I think we're all very aware of the consequences of the physical environment not being really up to par. Natural light is so important, as is being able to see greens and having plants, and as well as access to water stations and food, and you know, the basic needs that we actually all have as humans, let alone as women. So next slide please, Lauren. Let's focus a little bit more specifically on the additional challenges that women may face. So caring responsibilities, you know, a really, really key one here. Women naturally tend to take on the caregiving role. It's sort of genetic as well. And ultimately that can impact the amounts of extra things that we're having to multitask with on a daily basis. So it's not so easy always just to leave it at home. And especially we need to take into consideration women that potentially are dealing with more complex physical or mental health needs as well, with people that they support, that they love and support. Higher risk of some mental health conditions. So it is a fact that women are twice as likely to experience depression. Generalized anxiety disorder is another one, PTSD, and much more likely to battle eating disorders as well. So there is a whole host of reasons why we're more prone to it. But a lot of it can be linked to the societal pressures and that feeling as well that we just can't be seen to be not coping. Pay inequality as well is a huge factor, as is gender-based harassment, and it is worse violence and emotional abuse as well that can go on obviously outside of work but also in work. And the way that we're biologically created and wired, we have regular fluctuations of our hormones, so different phases during the month. And then obviously there are periods in our life where these hormones are much more intense. So the obvious childbirth, as well as like menopausal phases as well. So all of these can have a really big impact. And another one that's huge is around infertility. And postpartum depression as well, really, you know, is a big contributor to many women. Socioeconomic status as well has a major impact on our mental health. So we've currently got the cost of living crisis, and I know I was listening on the news yesterday, and it was saying that young women, this was in Essex, it was on Heart, but really experiencing and struggling with the cost of crisis. And part of that reason is the national living wage only kicks in actually at the age of 23. So we've got a whole host of women that are coming to work, you know, sort of in between those ages where that the cost of living is really, really impacting them. And there's a whole host of other factors. I mean, living in and on poverty in on its own is huge. People sort of not so socially integrated potentially. Nutrition can be a lot poorer. And also with women, a lot of their work opportunities that we can look at might need to be part-time. They can tend to be more lower skilled potentially, 0-hour contracts, much lower rates of pay. So again, that socioeconomic status has a huge impact. impact. And then double discrimination as well in minority groups. Women are hugely underrepresented in leadership at work, and women of colour, women members of the LGBTQ plus communities, refugees, a whole host of different minority groups that are more at risk. There's also sexual harassment potentially at work. Women tend to suffer a lot more with imposter syndrome, but also juggling paternal leave and being allocated the office housekeeping roles as well. Next slide, please, Lauren. So looking after ourselves, with everything that we've sort of covered there in mind, really it starts with ourselves. We need to be able to look after ourselves so that we can look after others. We've probably all heard the expression, we can't fill from an empty cup, or putting our own oxygen mask on first. So it is really imperative that we look after ourselves. And in order to sort of understand that in a little bit more depth, we're going to take a little look at the mental health continuum and how it actually fluctuates, which we have an example of here. So we might find that our mental health or well-being drops if we're going through a stressful time at work, for instance. So it could start very much at the poor end of that continuum. We could wake up, got so many pressures, we've got a big project that we've got to deliver, the kids aren't getting ready and getting up for school, and that's something I have to tackle with most days. And it puts us in a, sort of more in the poor sort of middle aspect of this continuum. But then we might walk into work and our team members are like, hi, do you want a cup of coffee? Have a little chat. Your line manager basically gives you some really positive feedback, let's say, and all of a sudden your mood can start lifting. So it's really important to know that the mental health continuum is never a fixed state. It fluctuates moment by moment, minute by minute, day by day, and there's no expectation for people to be permanently happy. The reality is we can't all be permanently happy. So it's a really good thing just to identify. Can I have the next slide, please, Lauren? Thank you. So one of the things that we can do, I don't know if any of you may be familiar with the 5 Ways to Wellbeing model. It's a really good model that basically gives us the 5 core elements that we all need to support our wellbeing and in turn our mental health, because our mental health is more at risk of going into crisis or getting a mental health condition if we're not looking after it. So this model we can really incorporate and bring into our workplace. So it's a good guide to use, and it's something that you could use with yourself, but also with women that you support and work with. And one of the things that I do is I'll sit with people and we'll work out on a scale of 1 to 10 where we fit or where I fit into those areas. So how I'm feeling those are at the moment for me on a scale of 1 to 10. And the areas that aren't as high are obvious areas that I need to put some focus and some energy. So it's a tool perhaps that could be incorporated as part of discussions or one-to-ones that you actually have with your women at work. It's also good with this to remember that we are all unique and we all have different levels of needs. So, with connection, as an example, some people are more introverted than others. So actually having a huge amount of connection for them could be their idea of hell, not enjoyable at all. So it's all about finding balance, and only you as an individual or the person that you're supporting will know what that looks like. But connection, it's something that we all need. It's a basic fundamental human need. We need to feel like we belong. We need to feel like we're part of a tribe. If it's missing, it can have a huge impact on our overall well-being. So we just need to be mindful of how others are connecting, specifically within the workplace. Perhaps sit together and come up with some ideas on how connection can happen more. Is there sort of like team events that you could do after work, or women getting together as a group, perhaps if there's particular themes that are coming up that might want to be discussed. So sort of brainstorming together to really identify how can we make sure that we're getting that connection. And giving. So giving doesn't always have to have a financial tag, and I think that's really important to stress that. Obviously, like fundraising and giving financially if you can and you're able to is absolutely great. But within work, this could be something like as simple as someone bringing in cakes, for instance, or perhaps letting somebody actually be a buddy for somebody and helping them integrate them into the business, or supporting them at a time when they're having a bit of a hard time. So it can, sorry, my voice is going to come to glass of water. So giving really can be absolutely huge, but giving fuels our sense of purpose. And again, it's proven to sort of know that it raises our well-being. And learning and achieving, this is sort of quite an obvious one really within the workplace, but it is quite easy for us to sort of become stagnant and we're just doing all the time. Are we actually pushing ourselves in the areas that we want to be? Are we learning and achieving, what we want to do? So having those conversations with your line manager, taking up opportunities, where there are opportunities, but actually by enabling those conversations to know there's an opportunity is a really good start. And being active as well. So being active at work, it is difficult. Let's be honest here. We're, on a computer, we're at a desk. Not obviously all roles. Some are the opposite. But being mindful of the activity levels. So, if it is a case that you are sort of fairly, behind a desk most of the day, you want to be more mobile, perhaps, just setting yourself a little goal target with your steps, or work with another woman, taking it in turns to go up and down the stairs and just sort of making a little bit of fun with it. But also, as women in the workplace, we can encourage other women to do the same. Meetings, for instance, can you do a walk and talk meeting? Does it have to be in the traditional setting? And then taking notice as well. We touched on this earlier, and again, it sort of feeds in here. And it is around just that opportunity to actually be present and in the moment. We're all very focused on what's happening next, what I've got to do. We're always sort of tend to be always focusing on the future. And that takes the enjoyment out of the here and the now. So little things that can be done to take notice is making sure you take those breaks, the breaks that you're entitled to, that are so good for your well-being. Use that opportunity to shut your computer lid or turn away from the computer, look out the window, look at the clouds, look at the sunshine, just take notice, listening as well, listen to the different noises, tones of voices. When you're typing, just maybe feel a little bit more when you're typing and actually feel that sensation of your fingers on the keyboard. And there's so many little ways that you can take notice and just be mindful of what's actually happening in that moment, and actually become just a lot more present, and it just makes life a lot more enjoyable. Next slide, please, Lauren. So this is a really simple tool that can be used in order to help you get present. And it's also a really good grounding exercise. So if you are in a position where you're feeling a high level of anxiety, or perhaps you're supporting somebody who's very, very anxious, this is a tool that can be used. And it's literally just 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And there's all sorts of different adaptions that you can use this for as well. And it's great with children. You can send them off to find things of different colours or of different textures. So that's it's just a helpful tool that you can use not only within work, but for yourself, but also for others as well. Next slide, please, Lauren. The other major contributing fact to the 5 ways is sleep and diet. So we all know that sleep has a huge impact on us if we're sleep deprived. So not only with our physical energy levels, but also cognitively as well, where it's a lot harder to process information or retain information, or recall information as well. So good sleep habits are really, really key. And I think sleep hygiene is a word now that is being thrown around, and you may well have heard. So very much our body likes routine. A bit why kiddies do like routine and get funny when they're thrown out of it. And we're not actually dissimilar as adults. Our body does like it. So perhaps finding a time, where you can go to bed and try and wake up at the sort of similar times during the week, sorry. But also being mindful of, are you going to bed hungry? Are you going to bed too full up as well? Have you eaten too late? First, are you hydrated, or are you too hydrated? Is that going to wake you up? Checking out your your sleeping environment as well. Is it comfortable? You know, is it dark enough? Is it light enough? Some people like light. So we're all unique, and it's about trying different things to really help encourage decent sleep, because sleep is linked to depression. And you know, so it's an area that is important to focus on if you're having challenges in that area, as well as our diet. You know, nutritionally, we need to be feeding our body not only physically but also for our mind, and mentally and emotionally as well. Our diet does play a huge part on, you know, how our overall well-being is. Next slide, please, Lauren. Thank you. So one of the other tools that we can use within the workplace and specifically to support women is a wellness action plan. So it's a really good tool to use for everybody, and really the key features are here. So it's a personalised plan to support somebody to stay well at work. It's for both you and the employer to use collaboratively. It needs to be self-led and it needs to be collaborative. And this tool can really support ongoing wellbeing and identifying the actions and the support that's needed in case a mental health crisis does arise. And it really just helps overall as well improve job satisfaction, performance, retention. But more importantly, people feel valued, they feel like they're being listened to and they're being heard. And it's a really good idea to implement this on day one of somebody joining the company, and make it part of your onboarding process. Who should have one? Absolutely everybody. So obviously we are talking women specific here, but you know, it is something that is really a useful tool for absolutely everybody. Next slide, please. So brief overview of what it should cover here. The key factors really it should encompass is what the employee can do to support their own mental health. As I said, this needs to be sort of self-led, and what ongoing support the employee needs from the line manager or mentor, buddy, company as well, to stay mentally healthy. Triggers are absolutely huge. You know, not everybody knows what their triggers are. But obviously if somebody does know what they are, then it's a great opportunity to discuss them and put a plan in place to help prevent or reduce those triggers, or a coping mechanism to put in place when those triggers do occur. And triggers can come on without somebody knowing as well, and you don't necessarily know until it's come. So that's something to be mindful of. And just having those early warning signs as well. So managers and people that you're working with can be aware of what support and action would need that can come into play next. Next slide, please. We have put the link here. So all of the templates are available on this link, and we're also going to circulate some PDF templates. There's different ones. There's ones for if you're fully office-based, also ones for hybrid workers, as well as for at-home working as well. And there's also a PDF, and also on this link here, a guide for line managers to be able to navigate the wellness action plan. So I hope that you will find that really helpful. Some of the places really where we can go for help. So GPs do get a really bad rep, but they are a great port of call. We have the NHS psychological services as well. So we've got the different numbers there depending on the region that you're in. There again, there will be a PDF of the full resource list as well available to everybody that's attended this webinar today. And Mid and North East Essex Mind, we've got a whole host of different services. So please do check out our website if you're in our area. And if you're outside of our area, then please find your local Mind and have a look at their website. And the Samaritans, you know, the Samaritans are a fabulous charity. They're available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And they can be a really good port of call, you know, either for yourself or if you're with somebody that you're supporting in crisis, you know, you could be with them while they reach out to the Samaritans. It's not always so easy to make a call like that on your own. And if someone you know or you are in urgent need of support or imminent danger, then 999 and the option 111, NHS 111, and option number 2 as well puts you directly in touch with the mental health crisis team. Next slide, please, Lauren. Oh, and the Samaritans again there. So here's just like a really sort of overview, I guess, of some of the key things, messages I hope that you've been able to get from today on how you can support women in your workplace. So really it is about us sharing our stories. You know, the more we talk about our own individual experiences, you know, and especially if we have leaders and managers as well within the organisation that do start to open up about it, it does help create that culture that actually this is okay to talk about. Our mental health is just as important as our physical health. It also supports reducing stigma. It creates awareness. Not everybody knows that they're potentially, you know, their mental health is you know, needs some support. And it's just around embedding that culture of well-being and listening in and on its own. Listening, it can be a huge intervention. So let's enable those conversations, you know, create that time, and more importantly, the safe spaces to have those sort of compassionate and meaningful conversations. Part of one-to-ones, for instance, and incorporating the 5 ways to well-being, you know, at work, but also in your personal life. But ultimately, we lead by example. And if we're doing everything that we can to look after ourselves, hopefully other people will say, actually, that's okay. And sometimes we kind of need that permission. And the wellness action planning that we've just gone through there, for everyone, you know, introduce it as part of your onboarding process. Make it a document that's a work in progress, you know, that it can be adapted in those regular one-to-ones, you know, have regular reviews as well, because as we evolve, as we change, our needs change as well. So what worked for us 6 months ago might not work for us, you know, in another 6 months. And really it is about empowerment. You know, women need to be feel empowered by those being self-led. You know, there's nothing worse than someone going, oh yeah, but you should just try this or do that. You know, the likelihood is someone is struggling, they've already tried a lot of these things. So let it be self-led, but let it be a collaborative approach. We're all unique. And really challenging that stigma and discrimination as well when you see it. You know, everyone starts doing that, then we can actually make a difference and start making that long-lasting change. Next slide, please. We do offer, this was a very quick, I guess, whistle-stop tour, as it were, of mental health. And we do offer much more in-depth mental health awareness courses throughout Essex, as well as suicide awareness, and also managing mental health in the workplace, which is a 5.5 hour long session and focuses very much on the workplace and giving the managers the tools in order to be able to actually implement true change. So I do hope you found that helpful, and that's my part done. So over to Laura.
Well, thank you first so much, Emily. That was extremely helpful and insightful, and like there was just so much information there for individuals to be able to take on board, and obviously employers to look to address and put into practice, so to speak. But before I go and introduce Laura, there was a couple of questions that actually came up, Emily, that I thought might be a nice time just to touch in on them. So it was highlighted, obviously, be active as being one of the ways in we can support your mental health. But if you potentially have a disability or you have got an injury, etc., and you're not able to be as active as maybe you would like to be, what would you suggest in terms of an alternative to being active as a way of managing your mental health?
Yeah, that is a really good, really good question. And I think, you know, we can obviously do what we are able to do. And we kind of, I guess, evolve and adapt, and we work out different things that might help. And I think it is just being mindful of like trying new things as well. But for instance, I don't know, like getting out, just trying to get away from the desk and get some fresh air, for instance, or creativity, perhaps, you know, actually taking some time just to actually be creative and using your energy, you know, being creative, making things, you know, I guess it's tapping into what, the way I always look at it is what lights me up. You know, what are my passions? And then that's what I would try and incorporate. But yeah, with the activity one, you know, that is a really good question for people that aren't as able. But yeah, so but maybe like, yeah, definitely sort of like still trying to get out, you know, and still having that fresh air, for instance.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe taking up painting outside. A bit of best of both worlds, but yeah, no, absolutely. And if there is a course around mental health first aid that you could recommend, is there a particular provider that you might?
So, to be honest, could I come back to whoever asked that question?
Absolutely.
I mean, we offer our mental health awareness courses,
Mm.
and we're actually looking potentially into offering mental health first aid, but at the moment, it's not something we do.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I can't think off the top of my head of a provider.
Yeah, no, I know there is a number of providers out there and so on. And
Yeah,
actually, I've heard recently that there is discussions at government level about the recommendations of having mental health first aiders within
like
within
the
the
legal
organisation.
and like
Absolutely,
the physical first aider, which which is
exactly.
amazing. And I think the thing is with the mental health first aider, it is really good to have people identified within your organisation that people know they can go to and have those conversations and have that immediate support or guidance, and just sort of keeping them safe for now, and giving them the support they need in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say as well is that mental health awareness in general, and it might just be my upbringing and my naivety, I don't know, but it was only 2 years ago that I actually realised how much I wasn't looking after my mental health and my well-being, because I was always putting everyone first. It was all about work, it was all about children, I was looking after elderly grandparents, and my mental health didn't even come onto my radar. And it was only really when I started my menopausal journey, which is a whole other element, that I realised how much I'd neglected it. And it was actually that I was in mental health crisis. But to look now, I was in mental health crisis, but I didn't realise. So I think the mental health awareness courses do a lot, because it actually encourages people to actually think about mental health in a different way, because mental health isn't just a diagnosis or a condition. Obviously it is, but it's a huge huge
Yeah,
topic.
it's such a
So, yeah,
spectrum
it really is,
as you highlighted. Yes.
yeah, but creating that awareness, and actually giving yourself permission to look after yourself, to help prevent, or if you do start experiencing poor mental health, knowing what works for you, because
Yeah.
we don't know how can we help ourselves, so.
Exactly.
So yeah, so the first aid courses are good, and they're very much, they're a lot more in depth, and they will go more into the actual diagnosis and a lot more detail. Whereas the mental health awareness, I love our one just because it covers actually looking after yourself, and I've got really
Absolutely.
selfish now. My well-being comes first. I can't be a good mum or a carer or good at work if I'm not looking after myself.
Absolutely. And I think we were speaking about before we went live about, how we have to be a little bit more sort of selfish in ourselves and looking after ourselves and so on, and doing that. And I think this is a brilliant time then just to introduce Laura May, who's going to talk to us and share with us a little bit about her own experiences of mental health in the workplace. Hi, Laura.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so much for your time, Laura, today. So do you mind sharing with us about your experiences with mental health? Yes.
No, not at all. So I'm part of the lived experience panel at Mid and North East Essex Mind. So I am happy to share my experiences. I live with a condition called borderline personality disorder. So I was diagnosed with that in 2008. Oh, really old. Borderline personality, or BPD we call it, is quite a controversial diagnosis in that it's not a very nice one. People don't normally like to get it. Well, no one likes to get unwell, but it's not a particularly favourable diagnosis. It doesn't have a great outlook, and it's quite negative. So a lot of people struggle with that kind of label. But I was really relieved when I was diagnosed. I was really pleased that I finally knew what was going on. And I would strongly recommend go onto the Mind website, have a look at it, see there's videos on there, there's quotes on there, there's real people's experiences, and you can get more flavour of what the condition is. But I could be here all day telling you about it, so I probably won't. But the main symptoms are you just have overwhelming emotions. So a lot of people I know describe it as it's almost like being an emotional burns victim. That skin that you should have around your emotions and your feelings just doesn't exist. It's just not there. So you know, as if you would touch someone who was burnt. You know, very similarly, if you don't say hello in the same way to someone with BPD, they might go, oh God, why don't they like me? What's wrong? You know, it's a real spiraling condition. So I would recommend finding out more about it. It's really fascinating, actually. But you may have heard it being called emotionally unstable personality disorder as well, or EUPD. I don't like that, so I can use BPD. But yeah, so that's my diagnosis, and I've always been really lucky to work full time. I am a marketing consultant. That's what I do. So quite high pressured, stressful environment, creative environment though, which is great. And I literally would not have been able to work without a lot of support and a lot of adjustments. So I think it's really important that we talk about mental health in the workplace and bring it out in the open, because otherwise you'll just miss out on a whole group of, you know, 1 in 6 people you'll miss out on. So,
absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. So, you know, you touched on this a little bit, but, you know, so what were the challenges that you faced really in the workplace when it came to your diagnosis and your condition?
Yeah, there's kind of 2 sides. So there's kind of like the internal challenges of, you know, me not wanting to ask for help,
right,
and kind of giving myself permission to be unwell. You know, you can't see what's wrong with me, so I will quite often go into work if I'm not well enough, because you can't tell. But you know, if you've got a great line manager, and I'm really lucky to have had some really great managers and really great CEOs, they'll see it and they'll know. Because you can tell if someone's not quite right, can't you? You can tell if they're not fully present. And I can understand how that costs companies so much, because we're so wired to be productive all the time and go into work no matter what. So yeah, it's interesting. But there's also the external side. So I think there's a real lack of knowledge around severe mental health conditions, and it's quite scary. You know, people don't want to say the wrong thing, so they just don't say anything, and that's not helping anybody. So
no.
I think, you know, every member of a company board or a senior management team, right through to reception staff, everyone needs mental health training. Just like they need health and safety or safeguarding, or, you know, it's just basic common sense to have it.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And, you know, we use this terminology, don't we, about normalizing the conversation, normalizing mental health. But I actually came across something this week where I was actually a marketeer, Laura, so right up your street, who said, let's move away from the term normalizing, because what is normal? You know, so again, what is normal? So we and it isn't an actual word, but we're going to make it a word. We're utilizing, you know, mental health, utilizing disability, because, you know, what is normal. But it's about having that confidence, isn't it, in yourself, and having the confidence in your employer to understand what you're going through, and your colleagues to understand what you're going through, to be able to best support you, and for you to be able to support them as well. You know, so it is a two-way thing. So, you know, what support were you offered, you know, in the workplace that you really find helpful?
Yeah, I shouldn't be really lucky. This should be standard. Everyone should be offered it, but I have been exceptionally lucky. So I cannot speak highly enough about the Wellness Action Plan. I've been using that since they were invented, and it is amazing. Every single person that joins a company needs one of them, whether you have a diagnosis or not, because we all have mental health. But it's really great to think about, okay, what does normal look like? You know, what's a usual day? You know, nobody is happy all the time. Nobody is in a good mood every day. That doesn't mean I'm in a crisis. So it's really, you know, making people feel more comfortable about stepping in and going, is everything all right? Or sitting back and going, do you know what, this has nothing to do with her mental health, she's just having a crap day, you know. So I think that's really important, to have a benchmark, and that Wellness Action Plan really helps. And great companies I've worked for always use them, you know.
I think a key takeaway from today is download the templates
Download the
from
template.
your
Yeah.
website and get
Yeah.
them implemented as part of your onboarding and induction process, and review them regularly. I think, you know, that's
Yeah.
it's
Oh, yeah.
really, really
Nothing's
important.
fixed. You
It's
know,
nothing's fixed, because we change as well, you
we
know,
do.
as we go through life. What more support, though, if you, on reflection, if you could, you know, reflect back, what more support would have been helpful that you were maybe not offered?
Yeah, so I was given some really great support in terms of, you know, being referred to occupational health. But I found occupational health very scary. I was like, oh my
Right.
God, they're going to fire me. That's immediately what I thought when someone said, right, we're going to send you to occupational health. But it is your friend, and it can really help you get some great adjustments. So I think because we don't talk about these things
Yeah.
in work, you know, you're only ever going to hear the terms occupational health if you're sitting in a meeting with your manager. Whereas actually, if everyone understands the company benefits and why that exists, you know, it's not just for mental health that you go.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think leading from the top. So having more role models in very, very senior leadership roles that go, do you know what? I've had my own mental health problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be a big charade or a diagnosis, or, you know, it's just recognizing that we're all human, and it's highly likely you are going to experience mental health problems. So the more we talk
Yeah.
about it and break down the stigma, the better,
Yeah.
in my opinion. It can feel a little bit sometimes. I mean, I have a severe and enduring condition, so I can feel a bit sometimes like I'm always banging that drum, and I don't want to be the mental health person. That's just one tiny part of my life.
Yeah.
So if we all talk about things a lot more openly, that helps, I think. So I would have loved to have had more role models.
Yeah.
But especially female role models, I really would have enjoyed, you know, I think I'd have found that easier to ask for help
Yeah. No,
earlier.
absolutely. And you know, there's one thing I think that COVID did do for us, and it really did spotlight mental health at work.
100%.
And I do think that we did get to see more stories being shared from right across the businesses, and those that you possibly wouldn't have thought that would have been impacted by mental health actually had been, or were living through it at that point. And you know, so that, you know, whenever we now reflect over the last couple of years, and I think you said that, obviously, Emily, you know, that you really only started to spotlight on what was happening in your own life at mental health. I really do think that with COVID and us being forced into living a life that we wouldn't have necessarily would have been done, and, you know, out of choice, then, you know, it has obviously put those added pressures on people's mental health, and it forced, I think, employers to really consider what they were doing in the mental health and the mental health support space. So here's hoping that we can now build on those brilliant practices that had been initiated and carry them on. And I know before we started this conversation, we said, has there been a little bit of regression in this space? You know, are we seeing things that we did put in place over COVID now maybe not necessarily carrying through? Emily, have you any thoughts on that?
I just unmuting myself there. Yeah, no, definitely. I think we all had to have the brakes slammed on, didn't we? And that in itself was like, whoa, what's going on here? You know, it's a big change and a shock as well. Like it hasn't happened in our lifetime. And then I do feel, you know, and this is just my own personal opinion, that, you know, the pressures, it's like everyone feels like they're sort of playing catch up a little bit, you know, and I think also as well, because you've gone from being very slow to then like full throttle again very quickly, that can have a huge impact, can't it? So yes, I don't know if necessarily. I think some people are still continuing some of the good things, but do we still see as much as like they're paying it forward, and you know, people, you know, being kind and actually, you know, there was a lot of community efforts, you know, I definitely don't seem to see as much of that happening anymore. You know, and yeah, within workplaces, hopefully there are a lot of initiatives that still happen, but I know in some of the managing mental health in the workplace courses we've delivered, you know, people have been really open. They've said, oh yeah, we did that during COVID. Why are we doing that? So I think people have slowly got back into, you know, it's like any habit really, isn't it? You know, if we change a habit, if we don't consistently and regularly do it, you know, doesn't necessarily stick. So potentially there were things that was, oh, well, that was COVID, you know, and now let's just go back to my normal. You know, which is a shame, because there were some beautiful initiatives and a lot of more thoughtfulness and mindfulness around people's actual overall well-being, and that motivation to help and care that really came across. You know, and for the ones that didn't, then they left and found new organisations that did care. So it's from a retention perspective, it's huge as well. You know, not obviously just from the human
absolutely
standpoint.
And hopefully there are obviously sessions like today, and you know, celebrations of mental health, you know, awareness days, etc., throughout the year and globally is going to just put that back onto the minds and the agendas of the decision makers as well within the organization. But you know, to your points earlier on, it is also our responsibility as individuals to take charge, and not always leaning in on what the employer can do, but it's also hugely your own responsibility to be mindful about what it is that you can do. And Laura, if you were to give, you know, one recommendation today, what would that be?
I think if I was going to give any advice to businesses, I would say get to know the women in your team, get to know the men too, obviously. But you know, women can be amazing champions for one another. And we're so complex. There's no one answer, there's no one fix. And that can be really frustrating with mental health, because we want to help people and we want to fix them. And you can't. You live with it. You know, I will never recover as such, but I can live a really great quality of life with the right support. And if we kind of champion each other and really build each other up and feel open and honest, you know, we can, you know, get to know the people that work for you. You know, they're people.
Absolutely.
They're just people.
I'm just looking at those, and if you can see them as well, the amazing things that are being shared in the chat. You know, we've got people, you know, leaders who are actually sharing in their one-to-ones, you know, about their own well-being and mental health with their colleagues, which is fantastic. And you know, putting it onto the agenda of next week's meeting and action, you know, the mental health action plan and well-being plan. I think that's fantastic. That is not amazing. Actually, I think, you know, as a collective group exercise, to look at it as a team, and to really, you know, obviously there's the personal, but actually, you know, it's something to look at as a team activity.
You don't have to share your whole life story. You know, I haven't done today. I've just disclosed that I have a mental health condition. But you know, you know, some people, get someone in who will share their story. You know, use the Mid and North East Essex Mind Lived Experience panel. Get someone in to speak and tell you their story. You know, how did they come to live with this condition, and what are the effects of it on their day-to-day? Because it's a full-time job having a mental health condition. It is. And then you have your full-time job. And then normally as a woman you have a lot of other things as well, which could be a full-time job. So you know, and that's not to say men don't have their own challenges. They do. You know, we have huge male suicide rates in this country. We have a lot of issues, but as women we have specific issues, especially around hormones. And our bodies sometimes betray us. So you know, even to the real simple things like, you know, a simple antidepressant will respond completely differently in every woman's body at different points in the month. It's something so simple as a tiny little tablet can have a huge impact on a woman's well-being. So know your body, know your life, you know, and know your staff, kind of thing. And yeah, I think it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question here, and I think it's more about, I think, something that we can consider together. But you know, do we think that senior management will talk to staff about their mental health? So I know that somebody, obviously in the chat, who is a leader, has said that, you know, he talks to his staff. Do we think that there is, I don't want to say like a course or a training or what have you, that gives the confidence for senior leaders to share and open up? You know, because I suppose it can be, it does leave you feeling vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
So you know, is there courses like that currently exist?
So, well, I mean, you can go to like your local Health Watch. So Health Watch Essex do like a lived experience course where you can
Yeah.
learn about what is lived experience and why does it matter, and learn how to tell your story effectively. But I think if you don't feel comfortable, don't share. Like, it really is personal, and no one's forcing you to do it. Maybe just have the opportunity for someone to share. It doesn't always have to be you. I speak at these events, but I don't always speak. Sometimes I don't feel I can, it's not appropriate, or I don't want to, or I'm not comfortable with the audience, or I perhaps wouldn't do a men's mental health well-being event. I might, but it'd be much more powerful to have a man there. So think about who would have biggest impact maybe on your team. And if you are a leader and you are worried about sharing, it's only really by leading that you can make everyone else feel comfortable, and that's kind of part of your responsibility, I think, as of being in that position. You don't have to share your personal information, but you do have to say it's okay to talk about mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been a question in, and I have to say I'm not aware of this, but there's some around trauma-informed practice. Emily and Laura, you may be more aware because you're in this space around that as an approach. Do you want to share maybe something around that?
Yeah, I mean, my input on that, would be, ultimately there is only a certain amount that we can do, and it is around signposting. So if it is trauma, based, which a lot of the time these things are, because we all have trauma, it is a case of sort of signposting and then directing to get the right support. So counselling, talking therapy, CBT, there's all sorts of different therapies that can support somebody through trauma. And one of the things that employers can do is having employee assistance programs in place, where there is that access to counselling services, there is that access to, maybe CBT or nutrition experts. Coaching as well is a great one, have in-house coaches and supporting people actually to move forward. It's not always about the past. So yes, I think it is very much about, making sure or looking at the support that actually your employer, or you as a company can offer, and then being able to signpost people, making sure the people that are having those conversations, so there is line managers and supervisors, having those one-to-ones, that they're also aware of the support. I think communication is really, is the huge thing here, making sure that everybody's got the right information to be able to then signpost people at whatever level. It's just about that transparency of what's available.
Absolutely. When somebody's going through such a traumatic experience like that, you would have to make sure you're directing them to the correct services that is able to provide that correct support, and not taking on those responsibilities internally whenever you're not trained to do that. So making sure that they are being signposted to the correct services, and indeed that the suitable training is then provided to the staff that is surrounding that individual, that's supporting that individual to be able to, I suppose, get back to work and in a healthy way. I believe
something on about that.
Yeah.
So I love trauma-informed approach. It's very exciting. It's been around for a long time, actually, but in the UK, we're not so fast in terms of doing it. But it's a way of approaching people by putting people first. So it's more of a way of talking to people and a way of supporting people, and I really like it. It's really about kind of what's happened to you to bring you to this point, rather than what have you done. It takes the blame away from the individual for having the mental health condition. So I would recommend everyone look up trauma-informed approach. It's a really fascinating approach, and it should be implemented everywhere. But NHS trusts are slowly getting there. And also there's a kind of a new approach to treating mental health as well, which is really around open dialogue, which again makes perfect sense. It's about getting everyone involved in that person's life in the room. we should be doing this anyway, but we're starting to see this terminology come about a lot more in our country, which is really lovely to see. So definitely Google it, find out a bit more.
Absolutely. I certainly will anyway.
Go onto the Mind website. And if anyone is affected by a personality disorder and they do live in Mid and North East Essex, contact Mind. They've just launched the first ever personality disorder service in the county, which is
fantastic.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Absolutely amazing. So really, sorry, little plug.
No, absolutely. And wow, what a conversation we've had. And I think, if we had time, we would stay here for forever chatting about this subject between us all. But thank you so much, Emily and Laura, for your contribution to what has been an absolutely informative and really insightful conversation. For the next upcoming event, we have, as part of our Purple365 program, we have on the 19th of October an audience with the Purple Tuesday ambassadors. And our Purple Tuesday ambassadors are those individuals with the lived experience of disability who are championing the Purple Tuesday movement, who are working with us tirelessly to engage with businesses, engage with the disability community, to really drive changes and improvements to that customer experience and to accessibility. And they're going to be joining us on the 19th to share some of their personal stories around their experiences as a disabled consumer. And then, and I can't quite believe it, we actually have then the Global Purple Tuesday Celebration Day, which is on the 7th of November. And on this day, we will be celebrating across 7 different countries. So we'll be very, very busy. But at 12:30 on that day, we will have a webinar where we will be looking at Purple Tuesday in action, showcasing examples of how organisations within our network have implemented and made changes and the impact that has had on the disability community. So if you want to learn more about how your business, if you're here representing an organisation, can actually be really proactive and change the disabled customer experience, then join us on Purple Tuesday, the 7th of November for that webinar session. So without further ado, I just want to say thank you again to everybody who has who joined us on this session. Really loved it personally, and take care everyone, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Thank you everyone.
Bye.